You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today, a debut author, and we are going to chat all about his new book coming out. So I'm going to hand it over to him to let him introduce himself and let you know where you can find him online.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nathan King. I'm a witch. I'm a psychic. I'm also a high priest within the Minoan Brotherhood Tradition, and I run the Grove Temenos Thea Nicta here in the state of Michigan. And I'm also a seeker in folkloric witchcraft as well as Gardnerian witchcraft. So, some pretty exciting things there.
Well, congratulations to you on your new book coming out. At the time that we are recording this, it's not out yet. When this episode is going to be published, it may or may not be out already. So if it's out, I will obviously have that linked. And if not, I will let you know where you can go for pre-orders. But congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. It's been a very huge journey, and I'm just super excited for this to get into people's hands. The reviews have been really amazing from other witches and other authors, so I'm super excited to see what conversations that this may spark.
So for anyone who is not familiar or not already following you on Instagram, I know you've been talking about it already and showing the cover and things. What is your book about?
It's a great question. So, when people are talking about the witch blood, it's often this mythopoetic terminology that has been used long before a lot of modern sort of traditions of witchcraft came about. And what it was referring to was this very physical, but also psychological process that people go through when they are consistently engaging in their practices of witchcraft. That by consistently engaging with the world of spirits and magic, it transforms you in a very real spiritual way. And so the witch blood is a terminology that many initiates use to identify that. And within the symbology of blood, there are tons of very core mysteries of praxis. So the things that you're doing in your rituals and in your spells, and there's a red thread or this vein of witch blood that runs in all of these different witch traditions, and it runs in all of these different witch mythologies and legends. So my book really picks apart what that is and tries to present that in a way that is accessible, but also in a way that is tangible, where people can actually start to use that information and start to put it into practice for themselves.
I love that. I think that's going to be a really great resource to have because that's sort of my favorite realm of books is these ideas that seem like when you're just getting started that they seem kind of out there or a little too complicated. And I love when books exist to make that concept something that is easy to understand and digest and apply to your own life.
Yeah, no, totally. And I have my own author copies that were just sent to me, and so I'm flipping through it, and I look at this book and I'm just very thankful that I had the support and the resources that I needed to write this book, because this is a book that I would have really loved to have at any point within my craft journey, because it has all of those sort of core mythos that I have always really enjoyed in one place. And I also address, certain histories, certain philosophies, and certain ideas that are changing in the modern day. And how do we address that? And I also try to give praxis that is maybe a bit more in line with the folkloric trend, or what our ancestors were actually doing when we're thinking about, the witches of old.
I think that's going to be a very interesting read for a lot of people because I think so many beginner books that we know of or made the most famous, sort of grew up with, are very Wiccan based, whether they say that or not. It just has permeated so much of what we had available in the late 90s and early 2000s. And some of that folklore and mythology and traditional witchcraft was lost. And it really is so different.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say it was lost, but it definitely changed. And a lot of things I feel changed because of, what was conventional for the time. Um, and that change definitely caused a lot of separations in different groups to really, set some boundaries with what was mine versus what was yours, but they're still all practicing witchcraft. And so I think for us in the modern day, especially because we have access to all of this information, the conversation that's happening a lot in initiate spaces, not just in the Wicca, but within other forms of witchcraft, is uh, seekers and initiates alike talking to each other, finding those common threads of practice, uh, and also realizing that a lot of these different traditions, a lot of these different books are different takes on different histories, but are fundamentally still very valid forms to what is the grand umbrella of the practice of witchcraft, which to me is so exciting.
It is because there's just so much, there's so much history there. That's one of my favorite parts of studying and practicing is just looking up the different traditions and learning like all about the more like European based mythology and folklore. I have German, I have Italian, Norse, Norwegian ancestry. So I just love learning about all of those different things and the ways that they intersect. So I'm very excited to read more of your book and just read all of those like stories, myths, folklore, all of my favorite topics.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited that you're excited, and all of those cultures, all of those things are highlighted to great lengths in the book. So please enjoy.
Very exciting. So, what has your journey, like your kind of path, been like to lead you not only into practicing witchcraft? You mentioned that you are a priest as well, and then into writing a book. How did this sort of get started for you?
Yeah, well, it's best to start at the beginning, right? So,
Always.
um, I think for witches, it's important for me, especially with what I'm talking about. But I didn't grow up in a family that would identify as witches. I grew up in what would be a very, Christian family, but we were very mystical. And they are still very mystical, because the Christianity that I was exposed to, is very Pentecostal, if you will. So there were the, psychic ability or using prophecy, that wasn't too different. So there were things that I feel that I was exposed to spiritually within even the church that really kind of influenced me to explore these older paths. And what really did it for me was when I started to read tarot cards. And tarot was the gateway that sort of opened up the world to exploring what it meant to be a witch and the association that witches have as diviners. And by the time that I graduated high school, I decided to move to Salem, Massachusetts, and explore, discover, work, and do as much within the world of witchcraft as I could possibly do. So I was a tour guide, I was a psychic, I worked in multiple metaphysical shops out there, and I was out there from 2018 till 2021, 2022. So until I moved back to Michigan. I've always loved doing workshops and lectures. I was at a local event out of Detroit, and Cross Crow Books found me as I was teaching a workshop on this very subject, and they said this would make an amazing book. And I said, okay, with no idea really of I knew I maybe one day would want to write a book, but I never really seriously thought about it. I had a lot of, self-doubt about uh, writing. So the fact that this is a finished product and it's going to be in people's hands is just the ultimate act of magic for me.
Oh, that's such a great life story and so exciting. I have not been to Salem yet, going next year. It's been on my bucket list for a while, so I'm very excited to
It is one of the
head
most
out there.
exciting places. I like to say it's like Mardi Gras, but for witches year round. It has the same sort of feel. And there's just so many amazing, amazing people, amazing shops. And just, there's history there. that I think is really important for modern practitioners to unpack. So yeah, check out Salem.
How has your family been now? Are they, I mean, you said they're still mystical. Are they accepting that you're a witch and a high priest?
Oh, absolutely. Very
Oh, that's
much so.
wonderful.
And my mom was the very first person to receive, my personal copy of the book went to her. Uh,
Oh,
just because that's my mom. And so much of I think the journey with my parents, because there's always a journey, um, has been as they've watched me grow and they've watched my magic grow, maybe not realizing it was magic. Um, I think they've really grown to a place of complete open acceptance, not just for me, but just for all of the people that they encounter. So there was a learned sort of experience uh, with them, and they're still pretty mystical. My mom still does dream interpretation, um, and it's just a very kind of one of those cool things that there's little things that we've always done that are very much rooted in the folklore.
oh, that's so sweet and nice to hear because I know not everybody has a, wonderful family story like that. So I love when there's supportive parents. Makes me so happy.
Absolutely. And definitely, I say it's been a journey. Um, because I think especially for parents who are coming out of the Christian traditions, that is a very scary prospect because of what the Christian teaching is, predominantly with witches. But I think when you actually look at the craft and you look at what it teaches, um, there's a lot of push and pull from each other. So I always say, don't throw out that baby with that proverbial bathwater because it very much could preserve the magic of old within it.
For anyone listening that maybe this is their first hearing of these terms, what is it or what does it mean to you when you say traditional witchcraft, tradcraft, folkloric witchcraft? What sort of does that encompass?
Yeah, great question. So first, when I am usually speaking about traditional witchcraft, I'm speaking in broad terms of what is initiatory witchcraft, a system that has been created either by people or a single founder that is then passed from one person to the next. So this idea of um, having time and having people that pass and teach this thing makes it such as a tradition versus folkloric witchcraft really pulls from the older aspects maybe that were before these modern traditions, and it goes directly into what the ancestral witches may have been practicing, but it doesn't seek, I believe, not for me, it's not a reconstructionalist practice. It's not trying to recreate the magic or the rituals exactly as, these witches in the medieval era were doing it, but it seeks the same mysteries within the same mystical symbolism that was being talked about. And that's why I like to say, these are sort of different takes on different histories, because they all have their unique signature flavor and aesthetics that they're pulling from. And if those things appeal to you, that might be the tradition worth pursuing.
So would you say that your book is appropriate for beginners that maybe are just listening to this podcast? They're like, this sounds interesting, but I know nothing else about it.
Absolutely, because I think the core, uh, hopefully the core message of the book that comes through is that witchcraft, unlike most of the mainstream religions, is not a external practice, but very much an internal practice. And it's an embodied practice. It's a physical practice. It's something that you get up and you do. So there's a responsibility into doing witchcraft because you have to do it to be it. Does that make sense?
It does.
So in this way, it really, I think, helps tap you into the awareness of yourself, of your own convictions, and tapping into your own body. And then through all of these different folklores and traditional teachings of what we have within the grand world of witchcraft, I completely leave it up to the reader where they want to take it. Because I very much think that when you're tapping into a magical current, you're tapping into the magical current of witches. I think witchcraft is uh, this multifaceted thing. I don't think it'll ever be defined. And I think if you are a witch and you're practicing witchcraft, then you're tapping into this current, regardless. And so that connection point with each other, even finding that common truth with each other is so, so important. And that is such a healthy foundation, I think, in starting such a diverse spiritual practice.
Definitely still something that people could read, learn from as a complete beginner, even if they don't have, let's say, a coven or brotherhood that they could be initiated into, they could still read this and learn from it.
Of course, and they could practice from it. So the book is designed in part one and part two. So in part one, you get all of the folklore, you get all of the informative, the intelligent sort of headspace stuff. And then in part two, you get hands-on ritual application, things that you can sit down and you can actually take the book and start practicing. And that was done very intentional. So that way, people who were new to this, who wanted to give this a try, would have a working book to explore with.
I love that. I think that's going to be such a great resource, and I am excited that it is going to be available for people. So thanks for pouring your heart and soul into that, as all authors do.
Of course. And, I really like to say I like tradition, but that doesn't mean that anybody else has to like tradition, right? This thing works for me. It may not work for you. But the thing I've really valued about being an initiate is the community aspect that it has brought to my life, the friendships that it's brought to my life. And there is also this aspect of having a shared practice with other people who understand these very nuanced things that happen, and these very nuanced mechanics that happen because we all do very similar things. So it gives a sort of common ground or a common language, and that's really the benefit of tradition. Um, there's always ups and downs with these sort of things, but the biggest up for me is I love structure. And for me, uh, in a practice, whether it be an art form or whether it be even a religious practice, I definitely knew at some point along the line of my practice, I would need uh, an outsider's sort of point of view. I knew I wouldn't be able to just sort of do it all alone because there would be no way of checking myself to make sure uh, that I was doing it with the utmost sort of respect because I really was aware of the spirits and the presences that I was working with, even when I was a solitary. So I think it just depends on where you're at in your practice and what you're looking to do with your witchcraft.
Do you have any advice or things that worked for you for people who are maybe interested in finding some sort of community but don't know where to start? Because that can be kind of a tricky subject to broach with people and to be able to find somebody. I know that, obviously in Salem, it's a lot easier, but maybe outside
Absolutely.
of that, that people aren't as accepting of witchcraft. How can you find those people and find a community?
Is a great question. So, surprisingly, you will meet a lot of witches through the Comic Con and science fiction community. Um, and the science fiction community has, specifically for initiatory witchcraft, been in the United States one of sort of the direct ways that people have been meeting each other. But now, as long as, probably the 90s, since different books and different publications, and of course the internet, I would really recommend the website, what's called Mandragora Magica. This is run by another fellow Minoan brother, um, but it's a really excellent resource to see what groups are available in your state, and it does it, state by state. You can also look at different festivals. If you're not looking at a group, I really recommend getting out into the festival scene, whether it be a pagan pride or a magical festival, um, or something about spiritual practice. The baby steps are always important, but I think with events, they can have this way of opening up the floodgates with the workshops and rituals that go on.
Those are great tips. I love the festivals. It's the best time and the best atmosphere, like the best people.
I think my first sort of ever thing I did in the public, with the first time meeting sort of other practitioners, I remember it was I think I had to sneak out because I don't remember if I had permission or not. There was like this rush to get there and there was this rush to get home. But what I do remember, it had to be like a pagan pride, uh, but there was a fire ritual that was going on, and everybody was chanting, and I just saw everybody circling around this fire, chanting this song, and there was just this moment of coming home, but also, holy crap, it's all real. I knew it was all real. Here it is. I knew, and because I think until you're actually in a magic circle doing the work that, people are writing about and people have talked about for years, you just have to experience it. So the biggest advice for the beginner is fight the fear of that energy of, am I doing it right? Or even that trepidation we may have to go in the dark under the full moon. But if you can actually do that, if you can get out under the full moon and you can listen to the wind in the trees and you can do those things consistently, it's that doing that engages the witch.
That is really great advice, not only for beginners, but even a great reminder to people who have been doing this for a while. I think that
Right.
it's things that we all need to, even if you're a solitary practitioner, it is nice to have that reminder. There is just something about the energy that's raised when it's a community.
Absolutely. And there's support in a community versus when you're alone, it does take a lot more work and effort and, personal emotional energy to do work on your own versus when you're showing up with your coven, you're not just showing up for yourself, but you're also showing up for the people in your coven. So it's a team effort and it's a shared effort. And that creates a very, very beautiful practice, no matter, who or what kind of group is gathering. Groups that gather are going to be tapping into a magical current of some kind.
And I do think a lot of witches miss out on that when they first start down this path because other religions, almost all the other religions, have worship places and regular times every Saturday or Sunday to go do that and gather as a community. And witches don't have that in the same way, and don't have those like temple spaces like that. So I think that's something that a lot of witches who switch over from a religion like that do miss out on. So it's nice to have these places to go and find that similar sense of community.
Absolutely. And even if there's not an event or there's not, let's say, a local group near you, the local metaphysical shop or the local occult bookstore, even if you have to travel a significant distance, I can make a pretty decent bet you're going to meet someone who knows something. And so really support your small businesses, support your small metaphysical shops because that is for the longest time, even since the birth and creation of Wicca, um, the metaphysical shop, the occult shop, has been one of the prime hubs where these people have found each other and where some of these ideas first took root.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely my favorite. For listeners that don't know, I've mentioned this before, but just in case you don't know, I am in Chicago and I am a 10-minute drive from Malloway Brothers, who are the creators of the Cross Crow books publishing that are publishing Nathan's book. So just FYI, I am 10 minutes from there. They are great people, so you should come visit too.
And I will be there the weekend of June 18th, so like the 20th through, and I will be doing an official book launch. So if you're around, come and check
Oh
it
my
out.
gosh. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah, I will be there. If there's any other listeners close to Chicago, you should come out. It'll be a good time.
Gotta love us Midwest witches. We just do it differently.
that is one place, there's like a bulletin board of all kinds of stuff like going
There's
on.
just so much, and it's nice growing up in Michigan, then moving to the East Coast, then moving back to Michigan, and just being so thankful for this land, um, and just how sacred Michigan particularly, but the Midwest, has this really intense magical energy to it, and there is so much folklore, um, that goes way back, to early settlers of interesting magical and witching practices.
Yeah, I love the Midwest. Obviously, I never have left. I went to college in Iowa, so it's just where I stay.
And people are nice here. And I'm not saying they're not nice on the East Coast, but I think, there is that cliche of the Midwest niceness. And to me, kindness is very important in people.
I agree. We are nice.
Yes.
Well, I would love to ask, we talked about this idea of community, and you also mentioned a line that I liked of what works for you might not work for somebody else. I would love to ask you, what does work for you? Do you have anything that you do in your practice sort of semi-regularly outside of what you do for work? But does your own personal part of your practice?
Yeah. So for me, I have and I try to keep it strict because I know that if I don't keep the ritual that I do regularly, whether that be at least weekly or if I can daily, um, there is a significant sort of effect. Like the ritual makes me feel better. The ritual helps me uh, sort of reorient and reset and do what I need to do to have good perspective. So that's the caveat with daily ritual is if you're really using it correctly, it can really make a noticeable difference. The struggle with daily ritual or weekly ritual is just the consistency of it. If you miss it, don't worry about it. Just pick it up where you left off. That there is no harm, no foul there. Just showing up and being able to do the work, making a sacrifice of your time is really uh, part of the the practice, right? Why it's called the practice of witchcraft, why it's a craft. It takes time to build that sort of ability. So for me, this is very simple. This is lighting an incense stick. This is lighting a candle, and this is taking a chalice full of water. And I have a blessing that I say over each of these things. And then I drink that water and I go into probably like a 15-minute meditation, sometimes longer, sometimes less, but you average about 15-minute meditation. And sometimes that meditation will turn into trance, which is just a deeper level of meditation. And that's just my time to reset with myself, to commune with my spirits, with my gods, and also, it just gives me a chance to know that I am maintaining this connection with this practice, whether that be in my solitary work or even within, my coven practice.
That's a lovely practice, and I like that you said sort of how simple it is and that it's 15 minutes. So I think some people get trapped in that idea of daily ritual being this thing that takes 2 hours of your time and trying to commit to some very long practice that needs to be perfect. And if it's not, then it's not effective. And
Right.
I don't know who has time for that in their daily life.
Right. I mean, and this is the daily ritual or the weekly ritual. Ideally should be something that you can just have memorized and you can just say to yourself, if you forget to do it. Um, Keep it, the more simple it is, I think the more success you can set yourself up for. Because when you get really, really good at the simple stuff, that's really how you advance, I think, in the magical practice. Those foundations and those basics are there for a reason. And I think it's really through those foundations and basics that we move into those advanced sort of perspectives. Uh, because there are only so many beginner books that you can read before you're going to be getting, recycled information. And so much of that speaks to uh, this is a practice, right? So you have to master those skills before you advance with the others.
Yes, absolutely true. And great advice and reminders. I like to do a simple, daily ritual, 5, 10 minutes. But it's nice to have those foundations and those basics and not have to write down a complicated spell and collect all of these different correspondences and sit down for a ritual and time it to the correct phase of the moon. Sometimes it's nice to just have 5 minutes out of my day that are just for me and a simple practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the more that you can explore those quick tips, tricks, easy things, the more you can scatter that throughout your day. And so I think the more magic, the more little acts of magic we put and infuse throughout our day, the more we're actively building not just, the magical self, but a magical lifestyle. Because so many people, myself included, we view witchcraft as a art form, as a religion, but it is also, importantly, it is a lifestyle.
And all of those little things really do add up in the long run. They sort of build on each other, and that it's just a buildup of that energy throughout the day and the week.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to just thank you so much for being here today and chatting about your book. Very excited for that to come out. And hopefully, I will get to meet you at your book launch. It would be very exciting.
Oh my gosh, it would be a joy and a pleasure. And this has been so, so much fun. And I was wondering, just because I have it here, would you like a little would you like a little sneak peek or a little poem from the book?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So this is just I'll do, let's see, a very, very short one, because we don't want to give the whole thing away. Um, let's see. Here we go. All right. So this is my poem called Drawing Witchblood. Revered and feared, the wine and the grail, the offering to the ancients, pact made between the veil. A flash of power erupts if a scratch or cut is made. Take care of the fairy blood, it shall be a helpful aid. This is the sacrifice of old. This is the blood made of gold. This is the fluid that turns the mill. This is the water of my will. Blessed be.
Oh, that was wonderful. I have goosebumps.
Oh, I'm so glad. And there's lots of lots and lots of poetry and sort of fun rhyme incantation throughout the book. So yeah, I'm really glad that I got the chance to uh, use those skills for this project.
Wonderful. It's so exciting. And I know that, it's a huge deal when you are a debut author like that. So again, congratulations to you. And thank you so much for being here and for sharing this, and opening up about your journey and experiences so far.
Of course, and thank you, listeners. And if you hear this, feel free to give it a share, to give it a follow, and to give our Witch Wednesdays some love because that's so, so important. And also, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, at Witch Path Magic and Occult, and you can also find me, Nathan King, Witch and Author.
And listeners, as always, I will have everything linked below to make it super easy for you to find. That is everything that I have for this week. I will see you all next week.
Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. And you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.